we're getting the experience right now
Yeah.
of how to film
Yeah.
a live interview.
I can.
Here we are, camera.
Hello, Panasonic.
People in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here we are.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Yong.
Yeah.
Yes.
So my name is Bill Yong. I'm a second generation settler. My family's from China, Sanwu, Guangdong, and I'm originally from Treaty 6 territory, which is also known as Edmonton. I'm visiting on this land. I'm doing my master's in drama therapy, and I'm interested in how we can use art as a way of having conversations about violence.
Okay.
And how people resist and respond to violence. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
But you also have experience as a clown and as a performer, as a dancer.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah.
What other kinds of work have you done?
I did some work. I did a lot of stuff in clown. I'm trained in like pachinko, so some of my like most prominent teachers, if that's the right word, is Jan Henderson. She was my first clown teacher, and Mike Kennard, and I did the Clown Farm with John Turner. And I'd done some work in like social equity, so I was doing a lot of community-based work. So I was working with seniors in a company called Jerry Actors and Friends, and so we would have conversations about issues and stories that seniors might have, but in an intergenerational sense. And we found that created a lot of new conversations about stuff. It was also part of this really cool research project by the CIHR, and it was looking at how creative aging and the impacts of being creative and how that affects your aging process.
Mm-hmm. What's the CIHR?
It's like the Canadian Institute of Health Research.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I was using acronyms. And yeah, and like they found that creative aging benefits health, essentially.
Yes.
And you can look all that up in terms of like what the research said. So that was that. I also worked in a company called Rising Sun Theater, and we used art, like mostly performance in theater and clown, as a way of telling the stories of neurodiverse folks and what their experience is and what their stories are. And then I also created my clown partner and I, Barry Belinsky. Hi, Barry. Created a show called Red Leather, Yellow Leather, mm-hmm. and it's had several manifestations, and it's a show basically about a Chinese settler clown and a Métis clown, and what race means to us.
Where did you take that show? Where did you perform it?
We performed it in Edmonton and in Calgary. 2 cities. And what's really interesting about that is like the show was so different in each, the response was so different, and as a result the show was really different in each city. So Barry is, part of his ancestry is Cree, and so a lot of his jokes and a lot of the content was very kind of Cree oriented, and so in Edmonton it was one way, people laughed at certain jokes. And when we went to Calgary, the show was really different because we were in Blackfoot territory. And Blackfoot and the Cree have been enemies, like historical enemies. And so we got some really fun responses, like, what the fuck are you guys doing here in Blackfoot territory? And the show became kind of like about that. Also in that time, Making Treaty 7 was happening with One Yellow Rabbit, and it was a show about the importance of treaty land acknowledging that. And we were part of the this puppet festival. I forget what its name was. Do you remember the puppet festival at Calgary?
Oh yeah, the Performing Objects Festival.
Yeah, the Animated Objects Festival,
yeah.
and we had this one bit in the beginning where, I mean, we were two clowns, but we didn't really know how to do puppets, and so we had these puppets, and we just made fun of treaty acknowledgement and like how redundant. It's not redundant. It's important, but just how it's become a thing about an excuse or like we're gonna make a treaty acknowledgement to appease the Liberals or get a grant or
right. And what kind of puppets were they?
I had in Alberta there's this store called TNT. I think they have it in Vancouver too.
I don't know.
It's like a Chinese supermarket.
Oh yes,
yeah. And there's this like plastic panda thing.
This thing? Where it goes like
No,
this?
no, that's a fortune cat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
it was like
plastic
it just
panda.
holds Jello, and it was a bit. I forget what Barry did. He like, oh yeah, he had this puppet. It was like a cloth puppet.
Okay.
And he put this like headdress on it.
Okay.
Which you should never do on stage. It wasn't a real headdress, but you should not put a headdress on stage. This was before we learned that.
Oh no.
And so they would make this treaty acknowledgement. We're on Treaty 7 territory, the traditional territory of the Blackfoot, the Nakota, the Cree, and the Métis. And we like to also thank like Enbridge and like Calgary Council for the Arts and the treaty acknowledgement. And then the end bit, our little like gag was like, oh, we'd also like to thank the Chinese for building the railroad at the very end. And then we kind of skirty go off. And that was our like little bit in the beginning about treaty acknowledgement that we did a little fun puppet piece about. And then it was a clown show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Can you share a story from any of your previous projects or shows in which, either about a challenge or a success that you've had? I know it's broad, but.
The first story that comes up to my mind was the worst clown gig I ever had. And it has nothing to do with, maybe it has, actually, now that I look back at it, it's everything to do with race and social justice or whatever I do. It was my first ever clown gig. I just came out of Baby Clown. And it was this children's festival called the Kaleido Festival in Edmonton. And it was a festival to try and, they called it Revitalize 118th Ave. Essentially, they were trying to gentrify that part of the town. They were trying to bring people to come out to the town, so they had a children's arts festival there. And we had like a roving gig there. And so I was like fresh clown walking around, handing out juice boxes. I really didn't know what clown was and how to clown essentially. I was just basically this guy with makeup on giving out clown boxes out. And one of the organizers realized that there was one of the acts didn't show up. And so they invited us to come on, and one of our friends foolishly decided to say yes. And she's like, yeah, exposure. And so we went on, and the the host was like, Sheldon, and right before that there was like an a cappella group, and they were so good. And Sheldon, who was the host, welcomed us, and she was like, okay, you guys have... At first, the understanding was Mary, who was the organizer, would make some announcements, and we would just kind of decorate the space. We'd stand beside her, and later on we found out, like, she was like, okay, you guys will have 15 minutes right before we went on. We had nothing. And so she was like, all right, go ahead, and we'd like to invite the Happy Accidents. That's what we were called back then. And they like scooted us on the stage, and we had nothing. We had nothing prepared. Here's a lesson about, like, prepare something. even if it's a light structure. We had nothing. And I was fresh. And I remember the night before I was watching Jon Stewart, and Billy Crystal went on. And the exact same thing, like a very similar situation happened to Billy Crystal. And all he did was he just asked all the audience members, like, hi, I'm Billy Crystal, where are you from? And they tell him where they're from, and he'd be like, okay. And then he'd do like a little riff about where they were from. And so I'm like, all right, I'll fucking do that. I will do that. And so, like, I took the mic, and I just climbed down, the stage was like this tall. I climbed down the stairs, and I was like, hi, where are you from? It was like, and they would be like, here. So that's another lesson, don't put your audience in the spot like that. I was like, oh, okay. And then I run to another person, like, oh, where are you from? And they'd be like, here. And then I was like, oh, okay. I was like, anyone not from here? And this guy's just like, ugh. He's like totally drunk. I could smell the alcohol. I was like, yeah, right over here. I'm like, where are you from? And he's like, here. And I'm like,
no.
oh no.
The audience was joeying you.
Yeah, they were joining me totally. And we're like, oh man, we're totally tanking this. And then Barry's like, hey, anyone want to watch me squish a juice box?
Oh.
And so he puts a juice box on the ground, and he stomps on it. It explodes, and it gets on everybody.
No.
It was so bad. and then Morgan's like, oh my god, we're all tanking, and she's like, hey, you guys remember the a cappella group? And they're like, yeah. Some guys in the back. He's like, yeah, bring them back. We're like, oh. And then Barry just starts singing the line Sings Tonight. He's like, wee. It's not working. Nobody's reacting. And then eventually Barry just takes the mic. He's like, all right, like, what do you guys want us to do? And the guy's like, something funny. And we're like, ah. And I wish I could say we, like, realized something in that moment, and it all, like, that was the moment that we realized something that kind of, something exploded and blossomed, but honestly that...
It just failed.
And it just felt so bad, that whole performance. And the most memorable moment wasn't all of that. It was walking off the stage and then seeing the next act there. And they're like, ugh. And we're all like, yeah, we warmed them up for you. And then we walked off. And that day, we went and adopted a kitten.
Well, then was the rainbow right after.
Right. That was our blue moment.
Yeah. So is the story a little bit about, like, in clowning, when you have the chance to, like, be up in front of an audience to know a little bit who you are and what you're gonna present and how you're gonna interact with the audience beforehand to have that kind of readiness, or like readiness to improvise.
I think that's so that, and also I think the only way you're gonna learn to perform is to just do it.
Yeah, and if you fail, you fail, right?
You fail, and I was just taking a play therapy workshop. This is a completely different tangent, by this famous play therapist, and he's like world renowned, and everybody wants to study under Gary Landreth. He does this thing called child play therapy, and the whole time he was saying, everything I know about children, I learned from working with children, from children.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I learned about working with children, I learned from working with children. And I think that's true in art, in clowning and performing.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in like, what I'm interested in is like clowning and performance having a societal impact. And it's true, like,
in order for that to happen,
you have to
go out and do it
and try it and fail, and
yeah.
and it hurts more because it's more personal.
Yeah.
Because it's more like, I want to make a societal impact, but I hear that noise too. I'm like freaking out. Is there going to walk through our camera?
No.
Yeah, they're coming from over there. What was I saying?
About getting out there and doing it, and it's our personal.
It's personal because like there's so much at stake, and the only way you're gonna realize that is by doing it and realizing what's gonna work and what's not gonna work, and ultimately realizing that it's just a show.
Yeah.
It's just a show, and people aren't gonna like your show and what you have to say.
They might not.
Yeah. And you're gonna have to react to that in the moment, especially because you're doing it in clown.
Mm-hmm.
And those reactions will come in such different ways. It can come from like a boo to a fuck you to a I choose to not engage.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to do that while keeping the audience safe at the same time.
Yeah.
But the audience is the person that you're targeting, that you want to be the seed of the change.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate that?
Yeah.
And I wish I could give an answer.
I think that's what our exploration is all about, right?
Is to just do it.
Yeah, just do it and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like puppets too, how that works. You just have to
It's just a different form, yeah. Did you find that the same kinds of things came up when you were working with your seniors group, for example? Like the same kind of challenges around performance? Were those issues for the people that you were working with in those projects? Like being able to be seen, or being able to just do the thing that you had practiced, or navigating the audience's reactions to whatever they were presenting.
Right. The seniors project was really interesting. Because seniors, Liz Learman writes about this. She talked about the impacts of younger people working with seniors. And she was working with a bunch of dancers because she was teaching at a dance school, and she decided to start this project. And she would try to get dancers to do something in class at university, and then they just like couldn't quite figure it out. And then they took them to a seniors home where she was doing the seniors project, and suddenly people were able to do the things that they couldn't do in university. She's like, why? And she realized that the reason why that was happening is because seniors are so unconditionally accepting
They
of
are.
them.
Yeah.
And when you have that, you can do wonders. You could fly.
Interesting.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of went off on a different tangent, but it's interesting because I'm interested in the ways in which artists go into community and are affected by non-artists. And I think that that's a perfect example. And I also worked with a seniors group in Vancouver for about 7 years. It was a Chinese seniors puppetry group.
Whoa.
Yeah, they spoke Cantonese.
Yeah.
And we worked with a translator, but it was pretty much the same group of women for about 10 years in this little group. And so we watched them get older, we watched some of them pass away, and we studied like all the forms of puppetry, and they got to perform every year. And sometimes most of the class would be like, and talking about their cataract surgeries, or like, you know, just shooting the shit, or saying like, where is such and such person today? Did anyone call her? And that would be like half the class. And then we would...
But that's material.
That's material.
You think about, like, one of the biggest things in geriactors, we had the thing called coffee breaks, and everybody would bring all these treats, like cakes and smoked cheese and fruits.
Nice.
and it was there in that informal place that some of the best content and material would come from.
And I think that often artists get into a kind of insular world amongst other artists, and they get into this dialogue of like, what are we doing? How are we getting our work out there? When in fact, like, some of the most inspirational ways to bring it out there is to do it with folks who might not know about the form already, you know, and how it affects you, how it makes you question what you do as an artist. So
why are you doing it in the first place?
Exactly.
Right? Sometimes we forget that.
We forget. I think that's just about having that exposure.
Yeah.
And getting out there and doing it.
Yeah.
I think that's probably good for our video.
Sure.
But it's been great.